Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. Thank God it's Friday. We have Kevin Allen, as usual, on Fridays, which we're always glad to have. We will start with some pre-show stuff. Russ, go ahead.
Well, we saw baseball come back. There were two things that really got me on the ESPN broadcast. I thought the game was fine until the rain out. Obviously, it's fine. It was a complete, it wasn't a complete game, but at least it counted. That's fine. And I watched a little of the Dodger game. The issues that ESPN had were when they let A-Rod talk to Rob Manfred and interview him. That's a prospective owner interviewing the commissioner on air, and everybody let ESPN know about it as it was happening, and it was uncomfortable in the sense that you don't know how this league's being run now, but that's not the way to do it. Yeah. And I think most people agreed on that. The other part was when A-Rod was in studio, he made the mistake that I've heard at least two or three major personalities, not only from ESPN, because I know people like to say it's just them, also say, well, baseball's first back and we're beating the NBA and the NFL to the punch. Nobody mentions the NHL. Now, yes, the interesting thing is baseball got a boost in ratings. They got a 50% boost. It was 3.85 million. But I'm telling you, I think because hockey will be showing playoffs, that if you count the Pittsburgh-Montreal game and you actually include the audience from Canada and the U.S. in that, I think they will beat what Major League Baseball did yesterday for their opening day. I did.
Yeah, I picked up on that sort of getting short shrifted from Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel, which is a show I really enjoy and think it's well done. When they did sort of a preview of what things are going to look like in the post-COVID world for sports, they had a representative for the reporter for the NFL, David Aldridge covering the NBA, and someone covering, I think it was Jeff Passan or somebody like that, or Tom Verducci covering baseball. They did not include the NHL. And then, by the way, after the 15-minute segment, they said, oh, by the way, the NHL is coming back on August 1st. And then they cut to the next story. It was like, my God. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's interesting that we're talking about that because I was on social media and I was really shocked. If you look at the buzz about the opening of baseball, and it's exactly what you would expect for the opening of baseball. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of stuff on the NBA. I've seen a lot of stuff. People have liked some of the coverage that the writers have had about, what's life going to be like in the bubble. And, because NBA players are colorful figures in terms of they're willing to talk and open up about things. There's been a lot of interesting stories coming out of the NBA. So there's sort of been a buzz about both the NBA and Major League Baseball. Right. But outside of our little world where, there's a buzz, amongst us, but there's very little. Like I noticed on social media, the general sports population, we're not even on the radar. Right. In terms of, I guess that's the way it normally is, but this is such a unique time that I thought there might be a little bit more. I did
too. I think the NHL actually got more press for just talking about coming back than by actually coming back.
Yeah,
no, that's a great point, Russ. I think you're right.
It's also, I think, a strange time of year for people to be thinking about hockey in late July. I think it's a paradigm shift that people they can kind of see basketball. They can definitely see baseball. Football is still well off. Right. The fact that hockey is starting in late July into August is like the complete polar opposite of what everybody is used to in that regard.
In the last 24 hours, it's gotten more mention than the NHL playoff, the NHL coming back. Taylor Swift's new album, and the fact that Fauci threw the opening pitch in Washington and that Trump is going to throw the opening pitch at Yankee Stadium, and each side in the political spectrum going back and forth on that.
All right, so here's the thing. The NHL does have a return to play special. Do any of you know when it's on, what time it's on, what channel it's on?
I would assume it's on NHL Network.
When?
August 1st.
What time?
Don't know.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. There's not enough information out there. Actually, it's today, Mike.
Oh, okay.
And it's at 4 p.m.
Let's say
and it's on NHL Network. Now, why 4 p.m.? 4 p.m. seems like such a bad time.
Yeah, why not put this in at put
it at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock?
Yeah.
Why are you doing it at 4 p.m. when a lot of people are at work? I don't understand a lot of this that's going on.
Are we good to start?
Just a couple quick things I wanted to get Kevin's impression on. One, I've heard of negotiations at the last minute, but trying to hammer out a playoff system 2 hours before the opening of the regular season, which is what MLB did, expanding from 10 to 16 teams. I mean, I know, Kev, that this is an unprecedented situation, but you would have thought that they would have had this hammered out weeks ago and not, 2 hours before the opening.
Well, here's the thing, though, and I've kind of watched this because I really wanted to see them do that because I favor expanding the NHL playoffs a little bit as well, and I just wanted to see. And here's what happened: they've been working on this for weeks, as everyone knows, but the players weren't on board.
Right.
But I think what happened is, when the players got together, when they got to the summer camp and started to talk about it, the player reps realized that the rank and file were actually in favor of it.
Yeah.
And so they, based on what I've seen reported, they reignited the negotiations and they got it done at the last minute because apparently the players do favor doing that. And if you think about it,
why is it surprising that players want more teams in the playoffs? I mean,
yeah, exactly. I mean, especially for older players, this is an opportunity. To get in the playoffs, and maybe that'll inspire some trades before the August 31st trade deadline.
I can tell you why, because in the old system, all the money went to the owners, but in this system,
I'm wondering. That was my next question, Mike. Was what the finances needed probably to be hammered out.
I think the players get a guaranteed $50 million out of the expanded playoffs. So in a year where they're getting a prorated like 35% or 40% of what they normally get, that $50 million getting spread around will be nice. The other thing is that increases the chances of Major League playoff baseball in Buffalo because the Blue Jays are coming to Buffalo, and I saw Anthony's top 5 list of things. I responded
Buffalo slogans to celebrate the Blue Jays' arrival.
I responded to you in private because I don't think that's politically correct for public consumption there, Anthony.
Oh my gosh, that's got to be fun. I would like to see that. Probably not online though.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
All right, I would like to have it, sure. All right, let's get going. Should we? Here we go. I got some interesting things I think today.
Okay.
All right, the hockey world. It is Friday, July 24th, 2020.
I'm Michael Lagello, and we're here in the home of the World Series champion Buffalo Blue Jays.
I'm Anthony Mangione.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, still a free agent.
You're killing me. And I'm Eklund, and you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is a podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And I was thinking a lot today because I was listening to a bunch of different people talk over the last couple of days. I've been trying to get my rumor chart up and running, and it's interesting because everyone's, running which way, every which direction. It's hard to get people on the phone right now because obviously, people are getting their plans together. I think once they get in the bubble, it's going to be a lot easier to talk to people because they're going to be there with nothing to do. So I've delayed a little bit for my chart for that reason. But I did have a question for a lot of people, and a lot of people definitely agreed with this concept. And and I wrote a blog about it today, and that is that are we looking at the playoffs completely wrong as far as the favorites and who we should be, who should be good and who shouldn't be good. And here's the basic thinking on this, guys. It's that we are not, we want to sit there and act like we normally do with the playoffs, like how they did in the regular season. But, to think that we could actually just unpause what we paused is really is ridiculous. Like that's not going to happen. We have just gone through an entire off season. Let's just, as it is. So we have all these teams are 1 year older, regardless of how you look at it, so the teams that were old and heading in the wrong direction are still old and heading in the wrong direction. If you were picking where they were going to finish this next season, you would be picking it based on that. And, so I went back to how I would actually predict the teams for the next year, how I would pick these teams, where I'm picking them to actually, play the next season. Where do I think they would finish as opposed to where do I think they would finish based on what they just did?
Well, let me just say this before you say that, because there's one distinct difference here. if this was an off season, these teams would be different because of personnel.
Right. And I think, Mike, that actually accentuates what I'm saying. And I think that actually makes it even more so because of the fact that we see teams that are hot towards the end of the year, but then they have to make all these changes because of salary caps or because of UFAs or whatever. And sometimes that momentum doesn't carry over. Yet I always look at how teams tend to do in the last couple months of the season when I'm making my predictions for the season following. I always take that into account because you're going to find some of your, like Kevin, you always say there's always like an underdog or whatever. You can quite often find that underdog by doing that, by looking at the last couple months of the season. You can see things that you didn't necessarily notice. So I said, okay, so let's look at because we are closer to 2021 than we are 2019. And even though this is the 2019-2020 season, let's look at just what's happened in the calendar year of 2020. And let's just throw out what happened before that. And where are we? Where are these teams really when you do that? If you're trying to look at it, and you get some really fascinating things. The first thing I did was I took the 2020 standings I wanted to come up with the best way of measuring this. You can take points per game, and I did that first by points per game, and that I'm going to bring this up here and show you some interesting stats for that. So, in the points per games category, I thought, okay, I know some teams. I think I know what teams are good. Well, that's not right. 1 second, hold on, let me fix this. Points per game. Here we go. Apologize. I think I know what the best teams in the NHL are. And then I go into this thing here, and there's the Western Conference. Okay, Colorado 1.4. They're the best team since January 1st. In the West, 1.4 points per game. Vegas, Edmonton. Okay, I get that. Those are three of the top teams. Then, how about Minnesota and Calgary at 4 and 5? Points per game since January 1st.
Right.
Both ahead of St. Louis. Slightly. How about Winnipeg at 1.06? Way down in 10th since January. And how about Arizona, 13th since January?
Well, okay. I think if you decide you're going to throw out what happened during the entirety of the 1920 season, and I think you have to throw out what happened in the last portion of the 1920.
No, because this is why I don't think so. Because you do, like I said before, you do see that trend. The teams that start to get it together in the second half of the season play better after their off season because there's that confidence. When you play well and you're playing well, and then you have a couple months off, your confidence goes up because you're like, we were good. We were good last time we played. We were good, and our confidence is going to continue to go up. Eastern, let me just finish one. Eastern is even kind of more interesting. So Boston and Tampa, we get that, right? Those are two really good teams. Tampa's fantastic. Philly, we all know they were good the second half of the season. But how about this? Columbus, the Rangers, and the Devils at 4, 5, and 6 since January. Mm-hmm. That surprised me. I'm sorry. That's just that really well, and Washington at 8, Toronto at 10, the Islanders at 14th. But then then again, so this was the first way I looked at it, and I'm like, points per game. I hate points per game because I hate the idea that you get a point for an overtime loss. So that's interesting, but let's throw that out for a second and go to this for a second. Real wins, okay? So because I'm like, how do you tell how good a team is? But if a team, what percentage of the games they win in 60 minutes? Let's throw out the overtimes. Let's throw out the 3-on-3s. Let's just get to the real wins. Is that how you do it? And you get similar numbers, but you get different things like Florida being and here you start to see because the points per game thing. How crazy is it that Ottawa is 0.81 points per game. San Jose is 0.90 points per game. And they're the worst, they're terrible teams.
Right.
Okay. I have one thing to add that might help. So on another show, we had Steve Valiquette on, and during the break, teams were calling him up to have him consult on how goals were being given up so they could tighten up their defense and their goalie defense.
Right.
Because now with them coming back, you're talking about these teams' offenses, but the coaches are actually going to concentrate on defense, not on offense. So you're going to see differences.
No, these points per game, Mike, Russ, these points per game are points, not goals per game.
No, but it's going to turn into wins and losses.
No, that's what I'm talking about, wins or losses. These are the points per game. I'm talking about 2 points would be if you won every game.
No, I get it. But what I'm saying
nothing
is
to do with goals. It has to do with winning and nothing to do with goals.
All the video, right. I understand what you're saying. I think all the video work that has gone into this now, you are going to see teams be better defensively now than they were before the pause, and that would definitely affect how they collected points. That's what I'm trying to say.
Let me ask Kevin this, because on that one list of the points list, you had Columbus near the high, 1.23.
Yeah.
Kevin, the Columbus team that earned those points in, say, the last 20 games of the regular season,
about 30 games actually.
Okay. Is not the team that will be taking the ice on August the 2nd. It's a completely different team.
Yeah. No, that's the point I would make about all this. The same issues that we had just analyzing it from what happened to the season we have now, which is, that in the second half of the season, there were teams that were momentum teams that got hot. And then there were teams that weren't good because of injuries, like the Arizona Coyotes. We expect them to be a completely different team because they were without their goalies.
Right.
So, and no matter how you measure it, that's going to be true. The Columbus Blue Jackets were all beat up. They didn't have Seth Jones. They didn't have Atkinson. Mm-hmm. They were missing a lot of people, and now they're healthy again. So no matter how we look at it, there's going to be issues that we can't factor in because they're going to be different teams.
For sure, but that's the crazy thing. Columbus did all that, and they were still like the 5th best team in the Eastern Conference.
Well, that's because they were gaining people as they went along,
right?
And they were good teams. So the other issue. Go ahead, and I'll get back to you.
I mean, and the final thing I'll throw out is this, okay? Because and I know this is a lot of stats and numbers and like that, but I find these kind of things like fascinating when you look at the end of things. The final thing I'll throw out is this, and then we can go on from there. Is the goal differential. So if you go for goal differential since January 1st, I thought that's always another interesting thing to do. And here you really see that Tampa is like back. Like this is where you see that we all knew that Tampa was getting better, but here you see that Tampa is the Tampa that was so crazy dominant that when they before they lost to the Blue Jackets, they're back. Philly is a serious team there, plus 27 goal differential, since January. That's serious. But then Carolina, okay, who is like at the 14th or 15th in wins and points per game, was the 5th best goal differential. That you can see that you can immediately point to goaltending, right? It's just simple to look at, and how you lose games, how you win games. Mm-hmm. But the Washington number on here, again, the Capitals. They were not a good team from January on, as we've talked about before, but it really is epically known that they are only a +1 differential since January 1st. Which is why.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
No, I was going to say it speaks to the defensive struggles that they've had. Your offense can only cover for so much when your defense is getting really struggling. And as I said previously, when I was kind of ranking the round robin teams in my defensive confidence, of the 4, the Capitals were 4th behind Philly, Boston, and Tampa.
Yeah. They are.
Which is the reason why Brian McClellan went out at the deadline and traded for Brendan Dillon and traded for Kovalchuk, because they realized that they weren't playing well at the end of the season. So
the final thing is this, Mike, and I'll let you go on, and then we can move on. But the final thing is this. The Western Conference, okay, where you have in the Eastern Conference, you have the Rangers, you have Columbus being teams that look better, like they're better than they could be. They're better. That we shouldn't necessarily consider them as bad as maybe you want to. In the West, you have Minnesota and Calgary, honestly, and the Wild basically are 4th in every category since January.
Well, they were the best team in the league after the trade deadline.
We get that. Not after the trade deadline. That's just a little bit of time.
But when Guerin and their new coach took over,
January is 30 games. 30 games to me that's not a streak. That's like a significant amount of time. That's not it's not like a team that gets hot. 30 games
in a smaller window of games. If you go 500, except for a 2-week span, and then you're like 8-1, it's going to make a difference. They were the hottest team in the league after the 23rd of February.
They were right, and that for the last 3 weeks they were the hottest team.
I don't think anybody's arguing against Minnesota.
No, I'm just saying that Calgary. I mean, I thought of Calgary as having like a so-so year. They were actually from January on. They were pretty good.
They were. I would list them as a momentum team.
Right, that seems more like
Minnesota. Minnesota figured out who they were with the new coach.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, I mean, so to me, and how epically bad the Islanders were since January is obviously apparent on these things too. That they were just horrible since January 1st.
I'll use this as an example. if the shutdown had not happened and we went into, through the month of March into the first week of April, and we're doing a prediction show, if we're talking about the Eastern Conference, I'm taking the Boston Bruins, because unless the Bruins lost every game the last 3 weeks, they were clearly the best team in the East during the year. They would have won the President's Trophy. Defensively, they're fantastic. Bergeron, Pasternak, down the line, they would have been. Now, after 4 months, with what supposedly has happened with 9 guys sitting out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things there. I agree.
Now, I don't think anybody says they're a surefire, no doubt Stanley Cup finalist. They could lose in the first round of the playoffs. Very easy.
Right, and the thing is,
they're losing the first round. But
the way I generally predict, I'm incredibly good at predicting for the first month of the season. Like, for some reason, I've always been this way. Like, where I get like the first month, I'm like, oh man, these teams are just up there. And usually the teams I picked, like, there's underdogs in the first month of the season are good, and usually they fall off eventually and all that stuff. But that's what's interesting, because we are looking at the playoffs being like the first month of the season and things being slightly, so to me, you have to look at, there are teams that when they have momentum, take the break and come back, they keep that momentum and then they fall off. The question is, with how the playoffs will change that whole dynamic of things.
This, to me, Eck, is where I think this is where measurement, we kind of go away from measurements, and now you have to start taking a look at team culture. You have to take a look at leadership, amongst the team, amongst the dynamics in the room, and getting everybody back. And this is where those group dynamics are really going to have to come into play, especially in such a unique circumstance as the one we're about to see.
And coaching, right? I mean, coaching, to me, when you don't have a fan base to motivate you when you get out there and you're cheering, we're going to really see how these coaches get their players up or not.
Well,
we're going to see whether they can get their players up.
I'll give you a good example of that. John Tortorella yanked his team off the ice after, I think, 10 minutes and browbeat them at center ice because they weren't showing the requisite intensity level. If you don't think he's pushing buttons right now to get them up for Toronto, I mean, that's what a veteran coach does.
Yeah,
like I said, I think they're going to be a tough.
Unfortunately for the Jackets players, they're going to be like stuck on basically like a field trip in school with your meanest teacher. That's the way it's going to work out for them. And I remember I knew when I was going on a good field trip because that teacher was nice and they would chill and we were going to have fun. And then when I was going with a disciplinarian, and I was like, this is not going to be fun.
Brother Theodore.
Is it better to be loved? Is it better to be loved or feared? And John, we know where John's going to go.
When you look at these numbers, you can't help but think towards the coach of the year. Like that comes out.
I mean, I'll give it to him easy. And I think Neil did a great job, but I still give it to Tortorella.
Go ahead, Kev.
Well, I was just going to say, let me just take this, discussion in just a different direction because, it's always fascinating to me. It always depends on which group of people you're talking to when you're sort of assessing. And in the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've had discussions with people, which led me to realize that there's a theory out there that everyone's kind of circling around, that this is such a unique situation that what might happen is everything we know about how the playoffs work may not be what's going to happen this year. And by that I mean this: we're so used to thinking, okay, experienced teams. They've been there before, great coaches. They come in and they get them organized, and great defense is going to work. But as been pointed out to me by multiple people who didn't know what someone else had told me, very similar stuff, said to me is that there's going to be some interesting things. Number one, nobody's defense is going to be as good as it usually is, because it's going to take time to get some cohesiveness. So maybe the first couple of rounds, it'll favor the offense. We've never had to play 5 rounds before.
Right.
Everybody's been off. Everybody's healed. Everyone has a lot of energy.
Right. And
so there's a theory floating out there that first of all, there's no favorites. Like, I've been asking everyone, who if you had to pick a lock in the first round, not really the first round, but in the play-in round, like, who is it?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say To me, it's the Penguins. I'm going to say
that's what I said, but I had two GMs said it might be the Islanders. So,
okay.
But the thing about it is,
Islanders.
like nobody's real sure about. what's
No, I mean you can't be certain.
This round. So the theory is floating around that the teams that are going to have the most success are the ones that just put everything out of their head and go out and play. That is, as Kevin DuPont said on my podcast, as he described it, is this is going to be the tournament where the rabbit is going to win. The rabbit is going to win the tournament.
Right.
And GMs have just said the team that just comes out with incredible energy and just puts their foot down and goes.
Yeah.
Now, when they said that, nobody offered, a couple of them mentioned some teams, but the teams that, you look at what you just showed me, the teams that are fascinating to me are teams like the Philadelphia Flyers, who are young, they got some energy, they're new, they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And could they just push it out if Carter Hart gets hot? Can they go? The Edmonton Oilers, they got Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, and they can roar up the ice. The New York Rangers, they've got the goaltending. They're young, they're hungry. Like, could one of those teams, just get hot and go? Just the energy teams, the speed teams, the teams that, the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, Austin Matthews, doesn't he historically just roar out of the gates, getting
right in the beginning of the year? Exactly, I thought the same thing.
Is he going to do that here?
Right.
Yeah, and because it's just like a new season, and suddenly the Maple Leafs are going to catch fire, and they're going to score average 6.5 goals a game, and next thing you know, they're going to be in the third round, and off we go. And you know what? I think that theory is as good as anyone else I've heard. Now, I don't know if that'll work, but it's
no, I love it. And you know what? There's something along those lines that I was talking to somebody who said the similar thing and said that, because my whole thing of the playoffs, what I love about the playoffs more than anything else is the way momentum shifts and how the team that needs to win more tends to win. Like that you get this thing. And how like the difference between a game 3 and a game 4 versus the characteristics of game 5, like these kind of things, when you're shifting to another arena, when it's 2-2 versus 3-1, I think a lot of that stuff's going to go out the window. Like, I think that's what I feel. I feel like that stuff's going to go, because you're not tying it up at 2 and bringing it home for game 5. You're not doing that. You're just tying it up at game 2. You're tying up this. So to me, it's like, we could see teams that are down 3-0 come back and win it. Much more easier than we've seen it in the past, because there's not this whole dynamic of having to travel back.
I don't know. 3-0 is still tough to come back from.
It's tough, but there is that dynamic that happens. Like if you're down 3-0 and you have home ice advantage, say like in the series, so you win that game 4, so now it's 3-1. Now now that game 5 becomes like great. It's like how that game 5, now you're coming home for that. You could possibly, now you take it now we say if they win 6, they're definitely going to win 7 at home. All that stuff, you know what I mean, that we talk about all the time, that I love. I mean, I love that part of the playoffs. I think that goes out the window when you're just showing up here to play again tomorrow. Like that's
going to be tested. That'll be tested. If we talk about game 4, Edmonton will have some home ice advantage.
I don't think it'll be much, but anyway, and adding to what you just said, the other issue that we kind of get involved in, and I've just completely lost my thought. We'll get back to that.
You'll get back to it.
I'll put one else in. I'll put one other thing in here as well. And this has been brought up a few times to me, and I think this is true. How the officials call the series. Are we going? Is this officials at the beginning of the season where everything's being called? Special teams, do they become obviously a major factor, especially in a short series? That, as I said before, that in a series like between Toronto and Columbus, that could be a huge factor in favor of the Leafs if they're calling it tight. If it's the usual type of playoff calls, then maybe that doesn't happen and it's more 5-on-5. That's something I'm going to be fascinated to see.
Well, and that's the thing. And you pointed out the dynamic, and Kevin, you pointed out the dynamic of the Leafs early in the season. The Leafs play fast and loose early in the season because other teams in the league are playing fast and loose because it's game 1 through 10 of an 82-game schedule. The dynamic is different when you're going into a playoff scenario where it's a best-of-5 series and you blow one game, you're 33% to a series win. The one thing we know for sure is we don't know what the hell is going to happen. But I would say, based on an educated guess, that this is going to be, it'll be sort of messy hockey because they haven't played up to speed in a while, but it's going to be exciting. But it's also going to be tight because they know the ramifications of these games. They know that they lose one game, they blow one play, and it costs them a series. So I think it's going to be like regular playoffs where it's going to be tightly contested.
I think the play-in rounds are going to be bizarre. Like I really think when we get to the playoffs, I think we could actually see something. But I wouldn't be shocked at all to see like Montreal go up 2-0 on Pittsburgh, win the first 2 games, then Pittsburgh come back and blow them out in 5. I think we're going to see things like that just happen, like because I looked all over the place because we haven't played best of 5 series for a while, obviously in the NHL. But I was trying to find the difference between statistically when a team wins game 1 of a best of 5 series versus when they win game 1 of a best of 7 series. Like we always hear, you would assume that winning game 1 of best of 5 has a higher statistic of winning than winning game 1 of a best of 7. You would assume because you're winning, you only have 2 more games to win versus 3 more games to win, right? But at the same, because if you win game 1, you're 1 game away from like putting a stranglehold on the series, essentially, and taking it to 2-0.
But the difference here is there's no home ice advantage and no home ice, no home ice advantage or disadvantage because these are all basically neutral site games.
And I do think, and Kevin, I wanted your opinion on the coaching thing. I think the coaching thing is going to be fascinating because of of actually seeing, we're going to see the motivation is not coming from the fans.
No, it won't be. And the coaches will need to be good.
Yeah.
The other thing that, and I think this ties into what you said, I wonder if we have redefined for this playoffs only what pressure is.
Right.
When I used to cover baseball, Sparky Anderson, who was coaching or managing the Tigers in '84 when I was covering baseball, used to say, if you talked about the pressure, he would correct you and say, there's no such thing as pressure in baseball. Pressure is when you're trying to feed a family of 4 on $32,000 a year.
True.
He said we're just playing a game, and he said if you bring pressure on, that's totally you doing that because nobody else is doing that.
Right.
Well. Everyone's kind of scoffs at that because we know there is pressure. But in this case, in the midst of a pandemic, when we didn't even know whether we were going to get to play, this feels a lot like bonus hocky.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like we weren't going to get this. Now we have it. And everybody kind of feels we're playing with house money. There are 8 teams that didn't think we were going to get in the playoffs are in. Yeah. And I wonder if everybody sort of plays like that. Like they just push it and say, let's just give it our best. Let's go all out. Let's just push it hard. And so again, where experience now, it's harder for me to believe that no matter what style we're playing, the Boston Bruins are not going to be a favorite. But I understand the people who believe that sometimes energy just overwhelms. And if we have a young team that, again, doesn't know what it doesn't know and is pushing ahead, it's not feeling any pressure, feels like they're playing with house money. Could they just go? I mean, I think that's why so many people are saying there's really no favorite, that it's more wide open than it usually is, and it's usually pretty wide open. So,
and then think about the concept of like how much teams, how much pressure there is to like win a, if we don't win a round of the playoffs, our coach is going to be gone or whatever. You hear that stuff all the time, right? So I don't think that that's going to count this year as much. Like I think that
I think it's I
don't know. I mean, I think there's a built-in excuse there, right? There's
maybe to a lesser extent than before, but I don't think a coach is going to get fired based on how badly a team loses in the first round because of all the exterior stuff that's going on. But there are still going to be ramifications of what happens. And I'll just use the example of Toronto. I've heard it said many a time here. If this team loses in the first round for the 4th year in a row, loses to Columbus like they lost to Washington 3 years ago and Boston 2 times in a row, and with their defense, the way it's going to be with Barry and Ceci leaving via free agency, there is going to be a significant change to the Leaf roster because they need to adjust. They know that what they're doing right now isn't working. If they lose in the first round,
are they even playing in the first? If they lose to Columbus, they're not
playing round. If
they lose, is that considered the first round when you look at pressure for them, or is it
statistically, yes. So
but you're still like you're still if you win that round and you don't get past the next round, you're still in the same thing where you've only got to the final 16.
Yeah,
you only got the furthest they've gotten is final 16 unless they win 2 rounds. They have 2 rounds to go further, and that's why I don't think this is even the first. That's why I think the pressure is totally different, and I also think the pressure is different. Like when you are trying not to get eliminated at home, what that does to that feeling that teams have, when you don't want to get eliminated at home. Just that's gone, right? So that and when you get eliminated, what your thing that happens when you get eliminated, you get thrown out of the bubble, right? And that's terrible, but at the same time,
and you have a 12% chance of winning Alexis Lafreniere. So
if you lose in the first round, right? So
yeah, I think if you're Toronto, I think you think there's going to be changes whether you win, lose, or draw. That because they're kind of economically,
Well, let's say this: Dubas will not get fired. Sheldon Keefe will not get fired.
Right.
The focus will be on the roster and specifically one of the 4 guys who are making over 50% of their salary cap for the next few years, and it won't be Marner, and it won't be Tavares, and it won't be Matthews. So that process of elimination, who will probably get dealt?
Right. I mean, I'm trying to think of the teams that this benefits. I don't know. I don't know what team. I don't know if it's the younger teams or the more experienced teams, or if it's.
I think it's the younger teams.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just guessing, but I do think that that they just they don't know, they haven't been around long enough to have known
I think
everybody's at square peg one right now. Veteran
so.
teams or young teams, and this plays to Kevin's point. That this is where experience doesn't matter, I think now, and it's just a completely different petri dish, so to speak.
Although
in this circumstance,
Anthony, I do think it sort of benefits a team, teams like Boston and St. Louis who went deep into the playoffs, or went all the way into mid-June, and now they have a 4-month respite.
That's true.
That helps
into the playoffs. I mean, right. I think
I don't know if they have a market advantage.
Right.
Over other teams, and whether or not that experience, because again, we can go back to the finals last year, and home ice meant nothing, literally, in the Stanley Cup Finals. So I just look at it and say, even with that, everybody's got certain built-in pros and cons to this format, and that everybody's gotten a breather. Everybody's starting from square one. There's no home ice. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, with veteran players, they're all ritual oriented in terms of how they train.
Yeah, right.
And so all of their rituals have been ripped up. Right, so all of them, they've had an odd summer. Everything is different for them. Younger players tend to be more like, "Where's my skates? Let me put them on. Let's go play."
Yeah, all the Instagram videos you saw were like younger players with their dogs in their driveways with their rollerblades on.
Yeah, no, that's right. So that's why, again, where I think, they're not thinking, Patrice Bergeron probably at some point said, "Man, this is just really screwing up my off-season preference," or especially Zdeno Chara, who's religious in his training habits. He was probably all thrown off. So
no, I think that's got to be the case. And I mean, from a fan's perspective, like we're cover the sport, but you remember we all still have the feeling of a fan. We're all still fans. Like I never buy into the fact that reporters aren't fans. We're still fans of the sport, and maybe not as devastatingly fans of a team. But remember the devastation of your team losing in the playoffs as a fan, and thinking to myself, is this devastation? Like kind of what you're saying, Kevin, is everybody playing with house money and the fans aren't going to feel that, and they're not going to feel like, my team's been knocked out. Well, that was fun.
No, they won't feel that way. But
you think the devastation's still there when your team gets knocked out?
Yeah, I mean,
it's your team.
Unless you're one of the 8 that really didn't expect to be there.
Yeah, I wonder if it's as intense. I mean,
there's a house money feeling if you're a Rangers fan, or if you're an Arizona fan who might have been on the outside looking in. But if you're Boston, if you're Tampa after losing 4 straight to Columbus last year,
even Pittsburgh. Let's face it. At the end of the day, Pittsburgh's having to play a 5-game, a 5-game series, 3 games, and they have one run-up game, and then they're right in it, and we're in that.
They won't be disappointed; they'll be angry.
Yeah, right. And to me, Pittsburgh would put Nashville as like a team with a ton of pressure, that a team with a window that's maybe closing. Making for a very interesting series between Nashville and Arizona, like we talked about before. Two teams that just never really got it together fully this year, and both, but one of them's got to go. One of them's going to make it. One of them's going to get through this. So now, what did we think about the? I didn't watch the end of baseball last night, but what do you guys think of the crowd noise concept and stuff like that, and your feelings on how that should be put in? Like, I did hear some things that the NHL is possibly going to do. I don't know if this has been announced yet or not, but I was talking to some people who have like work in the tech part of that thing, and they're trying to get like the goal horns for the actual teams.
Yeah,
they have.
This was all in the package that was sent out.
Yeah.
Okay, that's in the they sent that out. Yeah, I haven't seen that. I heard that was really great though. The package that was sent out. I heard that.
Yeah, the cannon will be shot off for Game 3 of the Blue Jackets Leafs series. Right. That'll be the game in Columbus. So like that.
What are your thoughts of pumped in crowd noise?
The crowd noise that they're using is going to be from EA Sports. That's what they're using.
Yeah. I watched both baseball games last night. Yeah. And first of all, I'm one of those people, I could care less about the cutouts or any of that stuff. Right. But I got to tell you, the cutouts actually work.
Yeah, they worked. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did. I actually noticed them, and I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Normally, I wouldn't care.
Right.
I was wondering, Kevin, if they had a cutout of Mary Hart behind the Dodger.
Yeah, they probably do. Yeah.
Waiting for when to get decapitated with a towel ball.
You don't know what's going to happen when the rain hits the cutouts. Like nobody knows what's going to happen with that.
No, but I mean, and I love the stories. Like some of the players have had their kids brought in, and like especially in LA, it's kind of fun because someone's going to be playing for are circling under a pop-up, and then you're going to look over and you might see Mary Hart was brought up or something like that. So anyway, but the other thing that I thought really worked is they're just playing it as if, there's still an announcer, they're still playing the music when the guy walks up, everything's the same, and there is, the noise, like when the ball's caught in the outfield, you hear some clapping. So it works. The only thing that's weird is when they hit when there's a rally going, you don't feel that intensity. I noticed.
Right.
It feels more like a high school baseball game where you're there's about 27 of you that are there watching, and there is some noise. So but I thought it worked. I don't think we'll be bothered by the lack of people in the hockey game.
I don't understand why the NHL couldn't have gone the extra mile, and maybe they did. Like I said, I haven't seen the package yet.
I don't know. They did. They've got.
But are they going? Okay, so this is interesting because I haven't seen this because I've heard so many great things about it today talking to people. But we have a dog who's now at the doctor's and might not make it. So we're just crazy days. Everything's crazy today. So I was up all night with this dog. So and I didn't get a chance to check out their whole package. But to me, did they do anything like where the fans will like we talked about before, like an app where the fans can react and that? See that? I think that would have been so easy to do, and I don't understand why they didn't do that. Where they could.
I think MLB's getting bad reviews for doing that because, for one thing, you could, if you're a hacker, you could hack into an opposing team that you don't like into the app and just hit all the boos. Like there's too much trickery that could go on with that. I'm glad the NHL.
I know the NBA did. They have these giant. They have in Orlando. They put up this giant side court of
green screen.
Green, not just green screen, but also like a screen where is video of fans and everything else. I don't know if people record doing,
that sort of.
It was strange. I know some of the players were indicating that was kind of it was cool. They were like, it was cool, but it was strange. It's like a thing you have to kind of get used to. And again, how do you superimpose that to make it look correct? That the fans look gigantic versus.
Yeah, they look too big.
They look too big. Exactly.
The other thing is the virtual reality aspect of things. Did the NHL talk about that at all? Because that's something I know.
Be more specific. Like, what do you mean?
All right, so I had heard that they had been talking about doing the thing with where if you had like a VR headset, you would get it.
They didn't talk about that.
You'd be able to sit more in the crowd. Be able to sit more in the crowd.
They have 8 LED screens, which I think will provide a lot. They, as far as virtual, they're not doing virtual anything. They're
I don't think they're doing anything interactive, because that would you would
No,
have
VR
to
is
have.
not even interactive. VR is just like, you know, like you can watch NBA games. If you pay money, if you have the VR headset, you can
That
watch
would
the courtside. Like
that would entail a level of security that they don't. I don't think they
That's
want.
not security. It's not.
Security and also how much outlay.
It's
What
not
is
security.
the outlay as well? That,
They
and
have-
whether or not the
they
league
have-
has that kind, it's a lot of money to sink. That's a lot to sink
Not,
in
no.
there.
It's not a lot of money at all, honestly, because it's like that's like the NBA one. I've watched the soccer one in Europe on my headset, and it's incredible. Like it's really literally putting up a 360-degree camera. That's all they have to do. They have these special cameras, and then just streaming that to an app that you have with your headset that makes you like look like that puts you in the building. And for NBA, you can sit courtside. It's unbelievable. It's incredible because you sit there and players are the actual size that they are walking by you, like that. And the NHL,
I think they're concerned more with the video presentation on television rather than any kind of next generation type of situation.
They are. I mean, they're going to have a dozen more cameras than a normal broadcast.
Right.
They're going to have one that's on on like a pulley over the ice.
Yeah.
So they're going to try and show up
All-star games like there's overhead.
It's even different than that. It's on like a one-arm thing. It's not like on a string thing, I think. That's the way
this is definitely the advantage to having all the games in one place, right? Like you can set up all that stuff. And
they're building stuff. Like you could hear the noise of them building. Like they're building what you would think the WWE would do for WrestleMania. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they're going to show certain amount of it for the playoffs, and they're going to show a lot more of it for the conference finals and the final. So that's they're going to ramp up to that. But as far as virtual, they're not going to do anything virtual. But go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say we should discuss what we were talking about before we started the show.
Yeah.
It is a big story that came out yesterday.
It's a dolly over the ice. Sorry, that's how they're doing that camera.
Which is similar to the NFL with the camera going behind the offensive line.
Yeah, they said it's on a truss.
Right. Kev, how these games are covered. I mean, we know it's going to be covered obviously on television, but with the pandemic, with the bubble, I mean, we know of reporters who are in Toronto and into Edmonton right now that are going through 14-day quarantine. Like somebody like John Worrell from Associated Press is in a hotel. He's been there for over a week, and he's going to spend another week there. But a lot of stuff came out yesterday regarding NHL.com reporters getting access, and this was when other outlets basically were not given access. They, 3 NHL.com reporters were given access, and Kevin LeGrand wrote, and I'll just read this quickly, in the Toronto Star yesterday. He says, if 3 writers from NHL.com can pass COVID tests and get into the bubble, then so can writers from other outlets like the Toronto Star, Sun, or at The Athletic. The NBA is letting writers in. The NHL, which you would think would be the hungriest for publicity, is doing its best to mute any discussion. The smallest of leagues appears to have the smallest of minds.
Yeah, no, it is disappointing that they didn't see fit to, because the NBA has gotten some pretty positive reviews of allowing media inside the bubble, and it's limited number of media, but then you're getting a real true picture of what's happening. Not that the NHL.com guys won't, do a good creative job, but there could be some things that they're simply not going to say that a reporter who is not a league employee would mention.
Yeah.
So it is disappointing, and I think I know my group is not happy about that, the Professional Hockey Writers Association, and but I don't know what we can do about that. I mean, this has been coming for a long time. The league is, now covering itself just like all the other leagues are. But it does appear that the NBA certainly sees value in having an independent coverage source, and for whatever reason, the NHL decided not to do it, and I think it's very disappointing.
Kev, it was about 5 years ago. I don't know where the meeting was, for the Hockey Writers Association, but that's when the .com guys thing came up. And what's going to happen now is the .com guys are probably not going to be able to vote. That's what it said in the email, and I do believe that that's probably what's going to happen, because if they are true league employees, they shouldn't be allowed to vote as hockey writers. Like, that's how it's going to shake out.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah. I mean, they're not voting, so
right.
So and I don't see that changing. But it's a I'm sure it'll be an ongoing battle, and the Writers Association. It's interesting, coincidental. This summer, I wrote a story about the origins of the Professional Hockey Writers Association. And it happened in 1967, right at the when we had the merger, went from 6 to 12 teams, and right after it happened, the organization had a lot of clout because it was a 6-team league, but the NHL was very dependent upon coverage from the newspapers back then. So they needed it. So they had leverage. But all it's a different world now. So they don't need newspapers. So that's why this is going to take some work. But I don't understand it. I've seen on Twitter today there's been a lot of people who have sort of stood up and said that we should have representatives there as well. Like if they didn't put anyone in, right? I think everyone could understand that. I mean, this is a difficult situation. The fewer people, the better. But the fact that they've given the NHL.com, which we view as competition, obviously, in there and not us, even though it's their league employees. In fairness, we just thought that they, if they're going to be in, that we should have some representatives.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I've always jokingly said to people who work for teams, that when they quote unquote break a story, they're actually issuing a press release, and then they're not breaking the story.
Yeah, exactly. Is this journalism or public relations based?
Yeah, I said when you put you work for NHL.com and you put something out that's a broken story, that's not and it's a press release. I mean, and what you're going to see is a bunch of press releases, and that's the difference to me versus employees and not, like a press release versus a story. That's not to say there won't be great stories. Like
I will say that we know many of the writers.
Yeah, and they're very.
Them obviously we're on the beats. Adam Kimmelman, Amelie Benjamin, Tom Giletti. We all know them. They will do their jobs.
Yes,
as because they're outstanding professionals. But it is tough sometimes. Again, to shade that whole concept
and say, "Hey, we diagnosed it." And
let's get this.
Sorry, I muted.
Thanks. Yeah. So that's always been the hairy difficulty. Of
it's nothing against those writers. It's the fact that these independent media doesn't have the same access that they have. And I have to say, in my example, like the Maple Leafs have included me on their conference calls like every other reporter, and that's a great thing. And I think that the conference call set up, if everybody was getting that, there'd be no complaints. But if certain people are getting one-on-one access as opposed to a sort of a conference call situation where you get one question, maybe two, it's tougher to do your job in that situation. So, got
a thing here. I just got this sent to me that I guess it's just released by the Blackhawks. I don't know if you guys saw this or not. That Brent Seabrook will not be traveling with the team to Edmonton for the Stanley Cup qualifying round.
Well, I mean, I know he was skating, but he only had surgery on both shoulders and I think a knee. So
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
him being able to play, it was a long shot at best. Kev, you weren't on the show yesterday, and we had the grand announcement of the Seattle Kraken as the name of the new franchise, and I'm sure everybody would be shocked to find out that I didn't think it was anything special. I didn't think it was terrible, but I didn't think it was the best name that they could have chosen. And Russ and I were sort of critical of the color scheme and the emblem.
No, I like the colors. You didn't. I just didn't like the logo.
Yeah, but what did you think?
Well, I think what I normally think. You're nuts.
We knew that though.
I think that I thought that this is one of the best rollouts that we've seen in terms of. I mean, there was like people who don't pay any attention to hockey. We're talking about the name, the color scheme, the logo. I saw somebody was just talking about how that that Madison Avenue has even taken notice of this. Like they couldn't have done a better job than they've done on creating an identity and a memorable one. And I thought they did just a really, really good. And, the Kraken makes sense for them. Right from the beginning, there were people who thought that, that was the name. And, it's so funny, but I think that Geico commercial really played a role in this because that gave more visibility to what a Kraken was.
What a Kraken is, yeah.
A memorable commercial. It was funny. It was sports related.
Yeah.
And the Kraken comes out and grabs a golfer. And and I just think it'll be great. And there'll be a lot of fun things they can do with the Kraken in terms of pre-game playoff stuff. I mean, it's going to be in Detroit. They're already comparing it to the octopus that the Red Wings.
I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether they're going to throw Kraken on the ice or what, but
they might have a problem with the ice after that.
Yeah, they would.
Maybe they could throw Gritty on the ice.
If they say, it would be definitely news if they actually find a real Kraken throw on the ice. That'll be something.
Well, yeah. Well, and how much would the Kraken be per pound? Like, man, that's going to be pretty.
Oh yeah, no, they're. They're more octopus-like than squid-like. We had this discussion yesterday because I had my son on to basically explain the difference between an octopus and a squid and a Kraken. He was helping me with that. But there's no question that they're more octopuses. It was funny to hear Brian Burke today on the radio actually talk about his feelings on this. It's kind of somewhere between an octopus and a squid, and it's like Berkey, man.
But you know what? If you're the Gary Bettman and the people in the marketing department, you're going like, wow. First, we get the Vegas Golden Knights. We had a home run, and now we got this organization that rolls out, like this. This perfect rollout of a logo that had everybody in the country. Like I opened up my MSN this morning, and it was the #1 story on MSN.
And they do it the day of opening day in baseball too, which is kind of They sold more than 50% more merchandise than the Knights did in the first 24-hour period. That's according to
it's a very versatile, again, color scheme wise, again, between what Vegas had versus, and I personally think the Vegas rollout was good. It was very good. I felt the Seattle rollout was phenomenally good.
Yeah.
I thought it was one of the best rollouts I've ever seen.
The other thing that's amazing.
The only thing I probably would have been, I was on board with Sockeye originally first, and then Kraken was second, but I had a feeling it was going to be Kraken the whole time. Just because there just seemed to be a groundswell for that particular, that moniker. And I think the color scheme's great. The jersey, I showed it to my 9-year-old this morning when he woke up. I said, "What do you think of this?" And he's like, our 9-year-old is basically the chief style officer of our household. Yeah. And he's like, "Oh my God, I love it. I want it." And it's like, there you go. You're going to get early fans, locked in early, and that's what Seattle's probably looking for in this case.
I didn't mind Sockeye either, but then you're locked into either silver or pink, aren't you? If you're doing
they're going to go with the salmon scheme. I think that was the big question, as to whether or not salmon was going to be included. Yeah. And they didn't want to go completely, and then everybody wants to talk about green, but then if you're getting into that color scheme, then you're getting into Seattle Mariners territory, I think.
No, you're getting into Sonics.
And the Sonics as well. No, in terms of blue, if you're going with that blue and green theme, then then you need to be unique in this case.
I said to Russ, with the exception of the teal and the blue, the jerseys look Vancouver Canuck-like. And it's like
the key is the red. The key is, I think, that red piping helps. I think the fade from that ice blue into the navy, into that dark, really deep dark navy, especially on that white road jersey. I think looks that white. I mean, as good as I think the home jersey looks great. There's literally no element of white at all in that home jersey. Yeah. But the road jersey is just this beautiful white going to ice blue going into that navy, and it is.
I did say Seahawks gorgeous for the chat room that's wondering. I did say that because they're saying Seahawks. So yeah.
No, I get that. I mean, I think that. I think it's pretty amazing. And also, the other thing that is amazing, I don't know if you guys saw this, but the Seattle team is going to invest 100% of the net proceeds from the team apparel into the community, partnering with Youth Care. This is 100% of the proceeds. 100%.
That's nice.
From team apparel into the community, partnering with Youth Care to end youth homelessness, along with other nonprofits serving the underserved Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the greater Seattle region. So
Seattle's got a bad homeless problem. They really do. I watched the whole documentary on it.
Yeah, we saw some of it when we were in Seattle for a little bit. So
at least they're not called the Seattle hockey team. Let's throw that out there. I mean, that's like
I'm sorry though.
It's a memorable name though.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm sorry, but and you bring this
Talk
up
about that for a second. The Redskins.
Well, yeah, let me just say one thing about that. Okay, it's clear that first of all, the owner did not want to change it.
Okay.
And he was forced to, and rightfully so, because it was offensive to a number of people. He wasn't prepared to change it. They decided on a name that they can't get rights to right now, that they're probably going to have to go through a legal process. I don't think it's such a bad thing to call them the Washington Football Club for a year while they're trying to straighten out what they really want. What do you want them to keep the offensiff name?
Yeah, I don't think it's awful.
I don't want them.
no,
to keep
I
the
think
offensive
it's a
name.
good idea. I
I thought it's a fine idea. I just think it's silly. I mean, I don't know.
They didn't have any options though.
Yeah.
Personally, my thinking is that they should have gone. I mean, I don't know. This might sound.
The rumor is they want the Washington Warriors. And that's
why couldn't they? I mean, the logo itself.
Somebody bought
There's a guy who owns 45 trademarks.
Yes.
So there's a logo, right? The logo, the Washington Redskins logo.
That's being done
versus the Chicago Blackhawks logo. Do we think there's a big difference there?
Yes, there's a big difference.
Yes,
Yeah.
I do too. I'm just throwing it out there. This is the
Well, I'll give you an example. My alma mater, Eastern Michigan University, used to be the Hurons.
Mhm.
And the Huron Nation, Native Americans, they were actually proud. We
Right.
did not, whatever caricatures they had, they got rid of. And they were just sort of honoring the Hurons, much like the Chippewas of Central Michigan honors the Chippewa Nation.
Right.
And they're on board with it. But they changed it anyway to the Eagles, which I didn't understand.
Right.
Because if you're honoring the Native Americans, well, Redskin obviously is an offensive tone. Now the Blackhawks, if you were honoring the Blackhawk Nation,
right.
So I mean, I don't know how
the Redskins find the nation to honor and go with that. That's what I thought was
the one that you want to bring up, Beck, is the Indians with Chief Wahoo. That's the one that everybody knew was going to go away.
Right. Now, there's obvious ones, but obviously the Blackhawks logo is used all over the place, right? Like that. Mm-hmm. That is the Sioux, North Dakota, right? University of North Dakota has that logo.
Yeah. Florida State also with the Seminoles, but there's always been an agreement between them. Yeah.
What was that?
All the same thing. So the Redskins, head is the different head, I guess, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I thought, if they gone with the Native Americans or something like honoring Indians, that would have been a good thing for me, like the Washington Native Americans, something like that. That would have been cool. That would have been pandering.
I don't think so.
That would have been pandering.
If you do that, you're turning too much in the other direction.
Yeah, just doesn't work. So
maybe not. But anyway, the Washington they should have gone with Washington Football Club, Mike. They didn't. They went with Washington Football Team. Okay. I'm better with Washington Football Club. Actually.
Washington FC, huh?
Right.
No, because that's soccer.
That is soccer.
I know exactly.
FC, yeah.
And I do hope, because there's talk about the Cleveland Indians changing their name. I do hope they go to the Cleveland Spiders, because that was the name before the Indians.
Same here.
Yeah, they can keep the C for
the scheme is not different. You just change literally at this point, since Chief Wahoo's gone, and also the color scheme works as well with the deep navy and the blood and and the red. I think it works within that. It'll work actually.
And they can run the movie Arachnophobia before every game.
Right.
Yeah. So the NHL still doesn't have. Finally, we'll say this. Bettman today, Kevin McGran reporting that Bettman says that Daly and the U.S. club owners and Bettman still don't have clearance to come into Canada or get into the bubble as of now, which I don't think is going to be an
They're clearly not worried about it. Actually.
Right. It's obviously nothing to worry about. But
now the families won't be there until the conference final and the final, so it doesn't matter for now.
Right.
So is Bettman at age 67 going to get in the bubble?
Of course he is.
He's definitely. I mean, I like how they really. I really, when I heard Bettman ask this before, and
he didn't say, but I'm sure he is.
It really doesn't matter. They want to make sure everything else works out. They've been very good about prioritizing. Like they don't, we'll get in eventually, kind of thing.
They're gonna pump in booing. That for him.
Yeah, when he hands out the trophy, are they going to pump in booing? That's a good question.
I didn't say they should. I think it would be a great.
That would be good, though. Yeah,
it would be hilarious.
I mean, look, if the booing exists for Bettman in any of the EA Sports renditions from the last 3 or 4 years, they'll have it. They'll use it.
Right.
That's what they're using. That's their sound base. They're using all their sound files.
Right. That's really something. All right, guys. I guess that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us. As always, it's wonderful to have you here. Thanks, Anthony, as always, too. And you, Russ and Mike. Yeah, good job. All right. Remember, folks, have a great weekend without the buzz. It is just hockey. This is our last weekend without hockey, so enjoy it.